hands down, one of the best ways to get value from your human design chart is to research it yourself. So many people are so quick to pass off their authority to someone else to read their chart for them, to tell them who you are. But in reality, you are the expert of who you are. You understand both your nurture and your nature that has happened throughout your life. And in being empowered to actually research your chart on your own, you're going to get a whole lot more from it.
Welcome to Frequency of Self, your go-to resource for the practical application of human design in life, business, and relationships. If you're ready to experience lasting transformation, hit subscribe.
Specifically, we'll uncover how to decode your human design chart using these books. I'm going to break down what the books are, what value you can expect from each one, and then point you to another video where I actually use these books to further analyze a specific energy in my life so that you can see how this shows up at the analysis level. This is the first book ever written on human design. It's called The Black Book, and it is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to really understand the love that emanates from this system and the power behind this system. The founder himself, Ra Uru Hu, was kind of this strange character that carried a lot of shadow frequencies. Not just my opinion, this is something that many people that know him have said. And while he delivered an amazing message, there were some questionable things about him as a messenger. But this book really reveals the early frequency that he carried when he developed this system. And then over time, I believe he kind of began getting jaded by teaching people and the way that it landed. It became more systematized and mechanical, and it began to lose that juiciness that he had at the beginning. So I highly recommend just reading the first part of this book and the basic overview of what this system is all about. The second part of this book actually goes into the original language that Ra himself came up with in regard to each of the gates as well as all of the lines. And I don't know about you, but I love learning from source material, and this is as close to source material as you're gonna get. This is the second book that I would recommend. This is really the textbook for human design. It is a later development that Ra created himself to further decode the gates and channels and many other things within the chart as well, but I personally love using it for the resources of the gates and channels. As you likely know, each channel is made up of 2 gates, and understanding the underlying mechanics of that gate individually, as well as them coming together to form the third entity of the channel, can be really beneficial. Now, I will say that some of this material is still very cryptic. Many of you have told me I've bought the book and I'm confused, and that's okay. The words of human design are ultimately a frequency that begin speaking to your cells, and so I kind of feel like just reading the words can be beneficial in themselves, and there might be some things that stand out to you as well. They definitely stood out to me when I was first getting started, but I would not stop there. Now, up until this point, we've primarily stuck to traditional human design. The next book I'm going to share with you is rather controversial if you stick to the traditional human design perspective. And yet, I would argue it's the most traditional form of human design, the most original form, because the creators of this book, Zeno and Chaitanya, they got into human design in 1993 when the system was actually developed in 87. And so they had a very early understanding of this system and continued to teach it up until the day that Zeno passed, and Chaitanya continues to preach it as well. I've had a reading with him, and he is an incredible resource for original human design language. Now, having said that, this book is incredible. Look how thin it is. It is the best book that I have ever read on the overview of human design. It really breaks down how the original systems are actually mapped into the human design chart. So astrology, the I-Ching, Kabbalah, and the chakra system. One of my favorite elements about this book is how it actually talks about the centers and the larger perspective of how it maps to the original systems. So looking at all of the gates and where they fall in terms of the different signs within astrology, as well as the actual I Ching and the different quarters that that are within that system, as well as the hexagrams and the makeup of the hexagrams. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's why this book is so powerful. For example, here you can see all of the activations within the throat center and where they fall into the wheel, as well as the root center and where those fall into it as well. Next up, Gene Keys. This is a book that was written by one of the original students of Ra, Richard Rudd, who then went on to go do his own thing, but it uses the exact same underlying mechanics in terms of looking at these 64 gates from human design, and he looks at them from a little bit of a different level. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about this book is that it takes each of these gates or gene keys and breaks them into 3 different frequencies that exist within it. It's like a band of frequency that you might be showing up at the shadow frequency or the higher expression of that, which is called the Siddhi. So when reading this book, you're going to see that there's a shadow, a gift, and a Siddhi for every single gene key. Richard has really contemplated each of these individual gates and broken them down into a band of frequency. It's not just a shadow element, which a lot of the original language with Ra was very much representing this shadow aspect of each of these gates. He also is considering what is the higher frequency of this gate or the expression of this, and then what is the gift, which actually helps you shift out of the shadow into the higher frequency. And while it might seem complicated to break a gate down into 3 additional frequencies, it's actually really beneficial, because if you only focus on the gift itself and you focus on embodying that nature, you're naturally going to shift to that higher frequency, or at least move towards the trajectory out of it, or even better, just shift out of the shadow. We'll dive further into this once we get into an example analysis. The Book of Lines by Chetan Parkin is one of my more recent discoveries, and I am blown away by this book. I don't know how it took me nearly 5 years to discover it. Now, in each of the gates, there's going to be a decimal and a number after the decimal that goes from 1 to 6 associated with each gate, and this is called a line. Now, it can be really complicated to interpret these lines. In fact, if you go back to the original Black Book, the first book that I talked about, you'll be able to read about the lines, but it's often very cryptic and hard to decipher. So Chetan Parkin took, I think, nearly 13 years, correct me if I'm wrong, to be able to develop this book, and really contemplated each of the individual lines and looked at several different I-Ching translations in order to come up with this. And I can tell you, as someone that has dug very deep into the lines by looking at the original text from Ra around the line companions and his breakdown and interpretation of each of the lines, this is so much more approachable. It's not original source material, but there is a value to seeing and reading how someone else interprets it and then trying it on for yourself and seeing if it works. Now, this is not a human design book at all. It is an I-Ching Workbook, which is one of the original systems that was integrated into human design. And that is where the lines actually come from. So by going back to the original language outside of human design, it can give you a really interesting insight into the individual gates, as well as the lines associated with them. And says it in very clear language that's actually easy to understand, because when you go back to a lot of I-Ching translations, it's very complicated. So now let's actually do some analysis.
Click the video on your screen now to watch the analysis video. I'll see you there.